Eulogy for John Decamp, 8/23/17. I first heard the name John Decamp as an opponent to my friend Bill Wiley as a candidate for the legislature in the 40th District. No one paid much attention to the race. Bill Wiley was a respected member of the legislature. His father and mother had both been state senators, but John Decamp campaigned from Vietnam and was elected. Senator Ernie Chambers was also first elected to the legislature in 1971. I was in the Capitol one day, and new glass doors were being installed to separate the legislature from the public. Glenn Crucier, who was the director of agriculture at the time, walked by, observed what was going on, and commented that Senator Chambers will leave his mark on the Nebraska legislature, which has happened. But don't underestimate little Johnny Decamp. He will be a force to be reckoned with. We are gathered here today to honor the memory of Senator John Decamp. John Decamp, husband, father, grandfather, legislator, attorney, and one of my best friends. When John arrived at the legislature, he immediately became involved in every issue that came up. As I recall, he also became close to Governor Jim Exon, who at the close of the 1971 season praised John as that gallant little battler from Neely. I introduced LB 776 in 1971, the bill which created the Nebraska Ethanol Board. One of the provisions of the bill was to remove the lead from gasoline because it was a hazard to human health. John asked me what proof I had that it was dangerous to human health. I provided him some information and suggested that he do his own research. He came back after a few days and told me that he would help pass the bill. He said he was convinced that the use of lead in gasoline could contribute to dementia and maybe Alzheimer's disease, about which very little was known in 1971. It is quite ironic that today we know that Alzheimer's was a factor in John's death. One of the last times I visited with John, when he still knew what he was doing, we were discussing Alzheimer's. He said, "Lauren, if I wasn't a victim of this disease, and if you were 20 years younger, we would sue the oil companies for using lead as an octane-enhancing element for gasoline, and we would make the tobacco settlement look like a penny ante poker money." He also said, "Someone will do that someday." I could cite many examples of what John and I worked together to enact major legislation. The first was in 1973 when I had introduced LB 312, a bill that allowed banks to build a second detached teller facility. The bill had passed with 25 votes. Governor Exon vetoed the bill. I moved to override the veto. I had 29 votes. John was voting no. Senator Terry Carpenter left his seat, approached John, and reminded him of the support I had given him. John changed his vote, the bill became law, and it was the beginning of many years of cooperation between us. Together, we changed the structure of banking in the state. We created and improved laws governing environmental regulations in the state. He was a major helper in passing the medical malpractice law of 1976 and always a major supporter of the ethanol industry. We also disagreed on John's successful effort to deregulate our telephone industry, but it never impacted our friendship. John had few, if any, hobbies. The only one I am familiar with was his love of flying. I introduced him to flying both airplanes and helicopters, and he asked, "Do you think I could learn to fly?" I said, "Of course you can." John became a pilot, and a good one. His only problem was that he treated his airplane like he treated his pickup. His idea of a pre-flight inspection was to walk around the airplane. If the tires were up, he thought the airplane was fit to fly. I tried to explain to him that inflated tires did not indicate that the airplane was airworthy. Several narrow escapes of which I am aware did not reduce John's love of flying. During the 16 years that John served in the legislature, he had many opponents, but few, if any, enemies. This is because he would help anyone who asked for help, and more often he helped without being asked. He was effective both in support of and in opposition to legislation, but he was more likely to be involved in trying to pass legislation, which he thought was good for the state of Nebraska. In conclusion, I must say that his most important accomplishment as an individual had nothing to do with the legislature. He walked up to me one day on the floor and asked, "Do you have any money on you?" I said, "I had a little." He said, "Give it to me." I emptied my wallet of a little more than $100 and handed it to him. He said thanks and turned to leave. I said, "John, where are you going?" He stopped and said, "I'm going to Nam, and I'm going to try to get the kids out if it's not too late." I said, "John, you can't go to Vietnam with $100. Let me cash a check and get you some decent money." He said, "No, this will be enough. The plane is waiting. I've got to go." About a week later, he was back. I don't think he changed his clothes, but John, through Ambassador Graham, had arranged for 2,800 children, sons and daughters of American servicemen, to be brought to this country. John eventually brought his wife, Naga?
No.
Na, to this country, and they've been married for 38 years and have raised 4 beautiful children. After I left the legislature, I shared office space with John for a number of years. There was always a steady stream of people from Vietnam in the office who were needing help. John never turned anyone away. He was always so proud that many of them became successful American citizens. For many years, people would come to me for help with legal problems. I always took them to John. He never turned anyone away. I also know that most of them were not able to pay John any fee. He never complained to me. John was always described as being controversial, which he was. But no one person alive knows all the good things he did in the course of his life. God, however, knows, and as I have said before, if there is a heaven, and I believe there is, John will be there.